Good day, VC, or anyone who might find themselves watching this video. This is the first episode where I show and comment on my krautrock records collection. I will go through my collection from A to Z in alphabetical order, no chronological order, no genre order, just go from A to B to C and so forth. This video will deal with the A through the C's of my collection, and I will speak a little bit about each band and highlight some of the records. If you find long videos with a lot of commenting tedious and boring, I refer to my last video on my krautrock records collection, where I just skip through and show the front and back of each cover without any comments. But let's start. Here we go. Let's start off with the band called Ainigma. They released only one album in 1972, I believe. It was called Delirium. Ainigma was a hard-rocking, psychedelic garage progressive rock band from Germany, and this album was primitively recorded, and it was originally a private release, just a couple of hundred, but it has been reissued many times. So if you like heavy garagey sounding psychedelic rock, Ainigma Delirium is perhaps something for you. This is a bootleg reissue from the 90s, but I believe Second Battle has done a very good quality reissue of this, which is still available for an affordable price. Next up is Almond Duel and their first album, Psychedelic Underground. Almond Duel is not the same band as Almond Duel 2. But Almond Duel was a hippie collective in Germany in the late 60s, and they recorded one jam session, which lasted for many hours. And as the story goes, all of their albums, this one and their successors, were taken from the same jam session. Now, Almond Duel, they were very experimental. This is a blend of lengthy jams, some song structures, and quite trippy. Some of the members could barely play their instruments, and thus made an avant-garde disharmonic sound, which actually is challenging to listen to, but very rewarding. This is released on the Metronome label, but it has been reissued and bootlegged several times, so an affordable copy is available. So if you like far out there avant-garde spacey jam-based music, Almond Duel Psychedelic Underground might be something for you. Another recommendation is Paradisvärds Duel and Rykvärds Singfögel. A branch of Almond Duel, the hippie collective and the original band, broke out and started Almond Duel 2. And these were the more competent players of the hippie community. They decided they wanted to start something with a little bit more substantial fundament in instrumental skills, if you like, and they released their debut album Follows Day in 1969. And this is an early example of space rock, cosmic rock. Lengthy jams, some song structures, and just a classic, fantastic album. This is a reissue on Revisited records with printed inner sleeves, and the story of the band here. A very well done reissue. So if you like space rock jamming, Followers Day might be something for you. My personal favorite from the Almond Duel 2 catalog is Yeti, the second album from 1970. And this is a double album, and this is where they find their classic form, with a combination of long improvisations and shorter, more constructed songs. My favorite track from this one is perhaps Archangel's Thunderbird. So that would be my recommendation. If you want to check out Almond Duel 2, I would recommend you listen to that song first. This is an original German copy on Liberty, but it has been re-released. Other classic albums from Almond Duel 2's period are Wolf City, which was followed by Tanz der Lemminge, or The Dance of the Lemmings, which I unfortunately don't have. It continues in the same vein as Yeti, but this has shorter songs, more structured, composed, if you like. And Carnival in Babylon, the last of the classic albums before Renate Knaup, the vocalist, left the group. These were also released on United Artists in England and the US, I believe, so they had some sort of commercial success. Almond Duel released several albums after this, and they are good. Live in London and Almost Alive, Pyrogeny X. All these are good albums, but they are not my favorite period, and their classic period was from 1970 to about 1974. But Almond Duel have many great records. I recommend you check them out. Next up we have a band called Nexus Qualm, and this is their first album from 1970 called Osmose. This is a reissue on Wawa Records, but they have reproduced the original cover art with the flaps, which are double-sided printed, and you can turn the cover into a pyramid. This is a far-out experimental acid psychedelic jazz rock, cosmic rock piece of music, and the songs are called Osmose 1, Osmose 2, 3 and 4. Osmose is of course osmosis in English. Nexus Qualm released 2 albums on the classic label Ur Records, and this reproduction or reissue is an exact repro of the original, almost exact, with the original Mach das Ur auf label, and of course it has the Wawa Records logo, and this was printed on purple vinyl. A very, very recommendable album and band if you are into experimental psychedelic jazz rock. Next up is a very, very classic band in the space rock genre. We are talking about Astra Temple, and this is their debut album from 1971, also released on that classic label Ur Records. This is a landmark in cosmic space rock, with Manuel Götzing on guitar, Klaus Schulze on the drums, and Hartmut Enke on bass guitar. Just a trio. Each side consists of one track, long cosmic journey on both sides, Amboss and the Traummaschine. And this is gloomy and far out. Very skilled musicians. This is a gimme cover, the way it was released, and this is an original. And you can open the cover twice to reveal even more artwork. It's a beautiful cover, and the contents within equally so. And here you get a glimpse of the original Martha's Urauf label. All the song info is on the other side. And if you want to explore Astra Temple's music, I would recommend you start with their debut album. It's a wonderful piece of music. Unfortunately, the originals are very expensive, but in the recent years they have reissued. I don't know whether they are legit or bootlegs, but I have read that Manuel Götzing is in the process of reissuing his older stuff, including the Astra Temple catalog. This reissue is very nicely done, however, with the original artwork, both flaps and all the artwork and the original labels. Astra Temple's second album, released in 1972, was called Stringham, and is equally as their first a masterpiece. By this time, Klaus Schulze had left the band, so they had a new drummer, and they brought along a vocalist for this one. So there are some vocals here and there, but mostly it is instrumental. A standout track from this LP would be Light Look at Your Sun, the opener on the album. Here you have labels. Mach das Ohr auf. The third album was called 7-Up, released in 1973, I believe. And on the front here, this is a reissue from the late 70s, early 80s, with a little bit of different cover art. But here you see none other than Timothy Leary, and he was the one who produced the album for Astra Temple. And why is it called 7-Up? Well, the story goes that Timothy Leary spiked everyone's 7-Up drinks and pressed the recording button. So, as the story goes, this album was recorded during an LSD trip, and it sounds that way as well. This is on the Kosmischen Kuriere label, a subdivision of Brain Metronome and Ur records. And if you're a completist, both the original and this version are worth getting, because on this reissue somehow they ended up using alternate takes. Astra Temple's fourth album was called Join In, which I unfortunately don't have, but it's very much like their first. And Klaus Schulze returned for a brief period on Join In. It's an album worth having. Astra Temple's last album was called Starring Rosie, and for this album Rosie joined to sing along with Manuel Götzing. By this time both Klaus Schulze and Hartmut Enke on bass had left the group, and it was only Manuel Götzing left from the original lineup, plus Rosie. In my ears, this is the least exciting album. It's okay. It has some cosmic, spacey elements and some folk elements, but overall, this is not their most important album, in my opinion. But again, if you are a completist, you might want to have this one as well. This is another Kosmische Musik Ur label alternative. Quadraphonic, by the way. Well, after starring Rosie, Astra Temple folded, but Manuel Götzing continued using the name Astra and released a couple of solo albums. I believe his first solo album was released in '75 and was called Inventions for Electric Guitar. Quite pioneering album. But this project, Astra, is all Manuel Götzing by himself, with sequencers, synthesizers, drum machines and guitar. The music is very ambient and soothing. It's early ambient music. If you want to explore this kind of music on the vinyl format, it's very crucial that you get good pressings, quiet pressings, because the music is ruined by clicks and pops. So that's the more electronic ambient side of Manuel Götzing's work. A follow-up to New Age of Earth was Blackouts, continuing in the same vein. Electronic ambient music with lots of guitar overdubs. Classic albums. Next up we have Rehearsal Machine, which is a wonderful album from 1971, and now we are in the landscape of folk rock. Rehearsal Machine recorded, I think they recorded a couple of albums, but this is the only one which is familiar to me. And the music is equally as beautiful as the cover art. Here you can see the inside of the cover. Rehearsal Machine sang in German and had male-female vocals, acoustic guitars, backed with bass guitar and drums. This album was released on another classic and very much collectible label called Pilz. And you might imagine what Pilz means in English. You guessed it, mushroom. And this is actually a repressing from 1980 or so. It's identical to the original, except for this, the Pop Import logo. So the first pressing is very desirable and gain high prices, but this, which is almost identical as the first except for the Pop Import logo, costs a fraction of the original. A really recommendable album if you like folk rock. Next up is a live compilation from the Brain label. This is the logo for the Brain label, which was a subdivision of Metronome Records. It's called Festival Essen, and this live compilation contains bands such as Novalis, Jane, Message and Guru Guru. What is extra special and funny for me from Norway is that Rufus, the Norwegian heavy rock band, is featured here. And why is that? Rufus had some sort of a degree of commercial success in Germany, and their albums were released there. And they were released on the Brain label in Germany. That's why they are included here. A fun piece to have for me. And a very recommendable album because of Guru Guru, Jane and Novalis, which were great bands in the krautrock era. A quick glimpse of the labels, which is the later 70s style Brain label. Before this they were the green Brain label, the green Metronome Brain label. Next up, we move back into the more heavy side of things. Blackwater Park, which were a heavy progressive blues rock oriented band with Hammond organ, fuzzy guitars and English lyrics. This is a masterpiece. Could be compared to Uriah Heep, Deep Purple and that sort of music. Very heavy and very nice indeed. And this is a reissue because the originals are very scarce and very expensive. But this reissue on Long Hair Records contains a printed booklet with the story of the band and some pictures and custom labels printed on a heavyweight vinyl. A very nice reissue. I recommend Long Hair's reissues. Another heavy prog rock monster is Birth Control's second album, Operation. This is an original, a second pressing on Or Records. And this is in the same genre as Blackwater Park. Heavy Hammond organ, heavy fuzz guitars, excellent. And Birth Control were known for their controversial and provocative cover art. If you like heavy rock from that period, this is one to explore. There's that Or label again. Birth Control's third album, which continues in the same vein, called Hooda Man, was released in 1973 or 72, I believe. 72, yes. This is released on CBS and is a bit later repressing. If you care about labels, originals or reissues, this is an affordable reissue, and sadly it has a single cover, not the gatefold cover as the original. But never mind, the contents are great if you are into heavy progressive rock. Birth Control. The next band, Can, almost need no introduction at all. They are one of the most famous bands from the krautrock era, and deservedly so, because they were pioneers. Both the drummer, I believe, the keyboardist Irmin Schmidt, and Holger Schukai, the bass player, had studied under Stockhausen, and Jackie Leapsight, the drummer, had also been playing jazz for many years before they started Can in the late 60s. Now, Can Delay is not their first album, however it's their first recording. Malcolm Mooney, their American singer or vocalist and lyricist, was on this one, and it's a fantastic piece. This record wasn't released until 1980 actually, and this is a spoon repress, Can's own label, which they set up after gaining the rights to all of their recorded material. And these are nice reissues with printed inner sleeves. Nice heavyweight vinyl and download cards if you appreciate that sort of thing. Their debut album, however, was released in 1969, privately released first, with a different cover art, looking like this. It was released on factory records, and I think about 300 to 500 copies were pressed, and it's extremely rare and sought after. But this is the official release when they were signed to Liberty Records, and this is a wonderful piece of music. Experimental, avant-garde, drony, improvisational, and just far out. It's a timepiece. And this is also a spoon reissue. I showed you the inner sleeve. All of these remastered spoon reissues come with these printed inner sleeve with a bit of history and some photographs. Can's next album was Soundtracks, and it's not an album per se, a studio album, but it consists of different tracks from different movies. So, soundtracks for different movies. And my favorite on this one, and perhaps my favorite Can track of all time, is Mother's Sky. I would recommend you start with Mother's Sky. The next album is considered their peak in the classic period. Tago Mago, Tego Mago, I don't know even what that means. But this is a wonderful, wonderful piece of psychedelic jazz rock, drony. It's almost undescribable because it's so much. A fantastic cover art. This is also a spoon reissue from 2014, I believe. A quite luxurious repressing reissue from Can themselves on the spoon label. This is a good place to start as well if you want to explore Can's catalog. The next album from the classic creative period is Ainigma, which was released in 1972, I believe. And this is also a little bit earlier spoon reissue. And my favorite track from this is the song Spoon. The last of the peak period, or at least for me the best period, is Future Days. And it was released in 1973. And they follow up their creative work and their signature sound. This is an original release on United Artists. We all know that label. Can continue to release albums throughout the 70s. Here's a couple of lesser known. This is a bootleg, I think. And many like their later albums, but for me the best period was from Monster Movie or Delay until Future Days. But Can is a very good place to start if you want to explore the krautrock genre or the krautrock years. The last 3 records for this first episode of my krautrock collection takes us in a more electronic, ambient, collage music direction. And it's Cluster we are talking about. And this is Cluster's first album. For this album they spell their band name with a K. The later albums they spell their band name with a C. But this is their first album from 1970 called Clop Seishun. And this is an eerie piece of music. It consists of 2 tracks, Cluster 1 and Cluster 2. Elektrik Musik und Texte und Elektrik Musik. This is a reissue on Bureau B Records. The originals are very, very rare, and if you find one, to find one with the cover intact is almost impossible because they were made out of plastic. This comes with the history of the band or the formational years in both German and English. And here it is a liner note about the music. The pure music of fear, Angstmusik. They were going for an eerie and anxiety sound, and they really did it with this album. Some spoken words and a heartbeat in the background, and just eerie collage sounds. This is one you don't want to put on your turntable when you're alone home at night. Cluster's next album, called simply Cluster 71, takes us further in the explorations of disharmonic sounds, but this time around with a little bit more synthesizer and sequencers and a little bit of cello. And the cluster by this time is a duo, because Konrad Schnitzler, who was on the first album, went on to join Tangerine Dream for their first album, Electric Meditations. This is also a masterpiece, but it's a challenging listen. But if you like to explore these kinds of sounds, it's worthwhile, and it's rewarding if you give it a chance. This is also a Bureau re-release with the same type of printed in sleeves in both German and English. The third album, and the last one I have, is a Lilith reissue with a CD of the album as well. This is called Cluster 2 and continues where the last album finished. Wonderful piece of music. So if you're into the electronic music, the avant-garde style, and more collage type of music, this is pioneering work and must have. That's it for my first episode of my krautrock collection and my recommendations. I hope you enjoyed watching the albums and listening to what I had to say about them. Stay tuned for the next episode, which will take us from D and further on. Bye for now.